Good morning, LunarCon! Welcome to the final day of the festivities and to Rating 102, How to Harness Your Insanity. My name is Remi Nightwind, and I am here with a special guest who is a quad queen herself, Ruby Mistral.
You're too kind, Remy. Anyways, as Remy stated, I am Remy Mistral. And as of Thursday, I have officially become a quadruple legend, clearing DSR.
Yeah. Which is the current ultimate of the Endwalker.
Before we begin, it's okay, Remy. Before we begin, though, we do have a few disclaimers that we need to state.
So, first and foremost, Ruby and I are not top tier raiders whatsoever, nor do we really pay your sub. This presentation is mainly filled with jokes and tips and tricks of things that we've learned through our experiences to help everything regarding raiding for you to find your own flow. So with that out of the way.
As Remy stated, now that we have that out of the way, we're going to cover just a few basic topics, and then we'll do a Q&A after we go through everything, just in case some people may have questions. So today, we're going to be covering just a few things, and those few things are going to be the following. Some short some general call-out terms and what they mean, some do's and don'ts of raiding, kind of similar to making a mindset, map arenas, and how they prepare you for Savage, general rotation knowledge, and going over both controller types. So, as a lot of people now have gone closer to being a part of raiding towards the end of Shadowbringers and into Endwalker, there are a lot of terms that the Final Fantasy community has developed very early on. That may not be familiar terms to you, as some of these are from fights that are back in Turn 9 of Bahamut, Coil Bahamut, as well as some of the fights from Alexander. So the first common one that we know is Dynamo. Now, typically, Dynamo means getting inside the boss's hitbox, and this is typically going inside that ring in most cases, with the exceptions of some of them being a little bit out. But the general rule of practice is to always just go inside the boss's hitbox if it's a Dynamo. The other one is Chariot. Chariot usually means to get out, and in most cases, this is just outside of the boss's hitboxes. At max melee is typically safe. There are some fights where this is the exception, or some of it's just right outside the hitbox, or it could be farther from max melee. And then the last general term that we have is Protean. Protean can be taken in one of two ways, either spread or clock spots. This term actually comes from the third Alexander fight, where the giant jiggly liquid does a Protean wave, which is a conal from him, and it can go across multiple people. So generally, the best term for this is known for clock spots, which can be north, northeast, east, etc., etc. So typically, you'll just want to spread to like a cardinal or an inner cardinal, or you'll just want to spread apart just to make sure you're not hitting anybody else.
Yep. And for further bits of communication, the main thing with communication itself is with StatX, you're going to be mainly using Discord to ensure that everybody is able to be heard or listen to said callouts. So with this being said, most of these communications would be to prioritize on yourself, where while it's a team effort to complete the duty, you'll need to keep an eye on your own movements so that way you know that you are able to find the certain rhythm during each fight. For if you're a healer, you'll also be able to call out who you're raising. So for instance, letting them know who you're raising, like say I'm raising Ruby, or I'm raising like someone on the other side of things, that they'd be able to further know not to raise that person, as well as for you two not to both use your swift cast. Also, ask questions if you don't understand anything. So for instance, if everybody ends up waiting and you don't understand like how you died or how a mechanic specifically works, but somebody who's a quicker learner ends up learning the mechanic first, they'll be able to help you in regards to answering any questions that you may have with said mechanic. So say that, hey, I noticed you were in this certain safe spot. How did you figure that out? And they'd be able to let you know their thought process. With this being said, patience is also key when it does come to communication, mainly because there are people that are slower learners than others. So please be patient for those around you if you are a quicker learner than others, for you are all in for the same goal. And lastly, be open to criticism. So with rating itself, there are specific parts of it that each person has to accommodate for. With this being said, some people may notice something within your area that they're like, hey, I noticed that you're using like Ifrit before Garuda. Is there any way that I could try to teach you a rotation for the other way around for better movement for you? That sort of communication.
Now the don'ts. Believe it or not, some of these don'ts are a lot more common than you would think, which is unfortunate to say, but it's a general huge term that kind of happens with raiding across any game. So the very first don't is being a distraction during raid. Some of us are more guilty than others.
I have no idea what you mean.
Of course. But try to keep your voice calls to a minimum unless you're the one that's typically doing the call outs. In this case, it makes it easier for other people to hear the call outs if it's necessary, or if somebody needs to call out their raise, like Remi had stated earlier. It's usually best to try to keep yourself to a minimum when it comes to speaking, just for the general term of being able to adjust on the fly. Now, for my most common one, and I really hate that I have to say this one, please don't yell and scream at others. I hate having to say this, but it's way too common in groups that I find, especially in Party Finder. And yes, I know that the damage that's being dealt is big, but we don't need to reenact what our wolves' pains are going through.
That's one way to put it.
We are humans. We have different learning paces. Getting impatient and yelling at those that might be a bit behind on understanding will get you absolutely nowhere and can turn a raid night from being already bad into an even worse situation.
Yep. With that being said, healers know when to heal or mitigate, so it's just like, oh, that's a lot of damage. It's not very helpful.
With that being said, I also have to make sure that this point is clear. Don't be negative. We understand that not every night is going to be a great night. We are all humans after all. So it's very important to make sure that you understand that your mood can actually impact the entirety of how the raid is going. One bad egg, after all, can turn an entire pile into something. There's supposed to be a joke here, but I kind of forgot what I was saying.
Well,
Besides
I mean,
that,
with raid, you put your eggs all in one basket, so like if there's one bag of egg in there already, then you know.
this is true. But always remember,
Things
we are
happen.
not perfect, and things happen. Now the last one. This one is also decently common. I am definitely one that's guilty of this one in way too many fame shapes or forms.
Yeah, about that.
Don't panic on voice comms. If you make a mistake, it's okay. Just remember to breathe and adjust accordingly. Remi is very guilty about this.
What? I know I am. So, with that being said, when it does come to fights, some raids want you to study more than others, but the main question is how much you want to study. So there are two different variants, more or less. There is one that is called blind progress, which is not literally blind, which from one of our previous panels beforehand, but It's where you don't see anything of the sort regarding the fight itself. You don't even see the opening cutscene at all. It's going in completely fresh, not knowing what the arena looks like, not knowing any of the skill abilities or such. Though if your group plans to not go blind, then they mainly go over things like the map arena, videos if anybody's cleared it beforehand, or just your raid lead dipping in their toes firsthand before the raid night begins. With this being said, as I mentioned last year, the map does prepare you for the savages or extremes at hand when you're doing it through normal. So with this being said, P1S, even though this is where I go into the territory of the Pandemonium map areas, so if you want to be completely blind, then this is not the panel for you. So P1S would be this arena here. While it is a square, this arena actually shows the. One moment. There we go. While this arena is mainly a square, it actually shows you how the boss does their AoE arena of effect spells within the two squares, grayer squares in the center. So, for instance, if the boss is centered, the arena would look like this, where the tips of the gray squares in the center of the arena show the entirety of the circle. Now, whereas with the transition change to the bullseye arena, as everybody likes to call it, this shows the indicator even more because of the ring of chains around the center of the boss, showing which areas are safe and which areas are not, whether it be in or out.
And that's just general term knowledge for P1S. Typically, usually they will do that in the first tiers of the fight. Now, with that being said, we're going to quickly show you a few things on the P2 map. And as you can take a look here, while we know the head shoots either a line or half of the arena, the line's AoE distance is signified by the stones on the elevated floor, clipping into the safe platform to throw players off just a tad.
This threw me off so much week one.
As someone who has progressed this week one, learning safe spots is definitely something that can be a bit of a traumatizing experience. But usually it's generally safe to always take a look, and as you can examine here, it's just a little bit above the halfway mark for the arena.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And like I said before, the cleave in the upper areas threw me off a bit. It took me a while to notice beforehand because I was always clinging to that side every now and then. I'm like, wait, how did I die? Moments, thus breaking the don'ts. Now, moving forward with the third arena, while P3S is annoyingly bright, like, oh my gosh, I'm glad that they fixed it, but it's still fairly bright. It has distinct patterns to tell how large AoEs will be. For example, with the first AoE that is that first large fireball, it actually shows that it's the outer ring of the entire arena is safe if everybody centers. For this is a baited AoE in Savage. And with the smaller eight circles where it is the rotating AoE, it shows that the center of the arena is the exact size of how it's going to be circling around the entire arena. Furthermore, you may have noticed the 4 squares in the center arena right past the AoE. These would indicate where you would place your flames to make sure that they're equal distant to each other to avoid them connecting and exploding, because everybody loves a blast of a time. Lastly, with this, you can also rotate them 90 degrees, so that way, further into the fight, you'll be able to place down the teeth that end up falling down that shoot the large colonal areas that kill you instantly.
Hey, Remi. Those are birds.
They look like teeth. Don't at me.
With that being said, though, we're gonna quickly go over, or we're gonna just kind of take our time with this one, as
Mhm.
P4S I know is a fight that a lot of people are still kind of progressing. So we can go over both the first phase and the second phase arena.
Yes.
So, as most people know, P4S has two phases. You have where you're fighting Vampire Daddy, and then you're fighting I'm sorry, what have you turned into? Can you please step on me? Sorry, personal
Remi!
preferences. So the very first thing that you'll notice is in this arena there are four lighter squares, or actually more diamond shapes in this case, that show the center of each quadrant, which represents a danger zone for upcoming mechanics that will be happening throughout the fight. In Savage, you can have up to 4 of these elements popping at once, while in normal, I believe it's only up to 3.
I think they go by 2x2s.
2x2s? Okay.
Yeah.
Then I could.
Yeah, because with Savage, it is lightning and then either poison or fire, and then shortly after, the opposite.
You would think I would remember this stuff. Anyways, yes, so keep an eye on those diamonds, because those diamonds will represent each quadrant of the map.
Mm-hmm. And then...
And to quickly... Hold on, because I'm also reading chat while we're doing this.
Oh, go ahead.
We are currently going over current raid tier stuff, but we can most likely go back and look at other fights if you wish. Since I know we'll probably have some spare time.
Yeah, during the Q&A, if you have any questions about specific other arenas, we'll be more than happy to help out how we can. However, I don't have those up right now as I did last year. Like, for instance, for Eden raids. I know I had those images last year, but I don't have them set up on OBS at this time.
Alright. And now, so... Obviously, for P4S, there are very few mechanics that you really have to worry about. And a little note here that I actually forgot to mention is you'll notice that sometimes you'll also, if you're in P4, you'll get an AoE that has an explosion around you. You can also kind of use the diamonds in between each other as references for the explosion radius. With that being said, though, now we have the second phase. And as you can tell, the second phase looks a lot different than the first phase's map.
It's all red and chainy, and I don't like it. It's like, something tells me that Hephaestus has a certain kink, but that's not my business to tell.
I could answer that one, but I don't think it's good enough for it. So, taking a look here, the diamonds on the sides, as you can tell, there are the 4 half diamonds and then the 1 center diamond in the arena. The diamonds on the side indicate the distance from where you can be from the death wall to ensure that no one runs into the wall during the third act. So during the third act, you're going to have these chains. You're going to have 3 different ones, 2 if you're a DPS or 3 if you're a tank or healer, which are going to be green, red, or purple and nothing.
Mm-hmm.
What you'll notice is for those diamonds, they're showing you that as long as you are that distance away from the one half to the other half, you're able to break the chain without necessarily having to worry about it going off and killing everybody else, or really having to worry about the mechanic failing.
And for slight reference, for I do apologize, this is going to look a little bit off. One moment. These are the squares that we are speaking of, or diamonds.
Let's just say finding an empty map of P4S P2 was so hard that Remi had to actually get this one done herself. Themselves.
Yeah, it was... Finding these assets can be a little bit daunting sometimes. Sometimes they have markers on them, other times they have the complete boss. So I had to basically pick and choose certain blank areas to be able to provide the assets that I have.
So, thanks, Rams.
Time. Glad I got
With that being said, we're going to be going to a little bit more of some nitty-gritty stuff here. We're going to be going more into rotations and your keyboard mouse controller types and layouts. So I'm going to start us off, as we're going to be talking about some general typical rotation things, as each class has its own identical set that you can, or has its own identical set rotation that you can follow. However, at certain points throughout the fight, there are going to be times where you're not going to be able to fully do that same rotation because you might have to get off the boss in order to do a mechanic, or you might have to focus on getting on resolving a mechanic before being able to fully go back in and DPSing the boss. Optimizing this is something that's not going to always be easy to do at first, as when you're first seeing mechanics, it's always a better priority to focus on doing the mechanic first before actually trying to get any sort of uptime with the fight. With that being said, there are always plenty of resources out there in regards to how your class should play, and I can always and will always happily provide any information that I can. For anybody who is curious about how certain classes might play or how your class might play, for example. As well as there are ways to look at, as some of these resources already have ways that you can optimize your rotation in certain fights. I know Summoner has a lot of different optimizations in P4S, P2 in their summoning order, which can help optimize their movement for certain mechanics where you're constantly on the move.
I have so many Legos.
And one thing that I do have to take out of Joe Cat's book, because he puts it very well, always remember your ABCs. Always be casting. And yes, melee buttons count as casting. Even Red Mage.
Because everybody seems to forget that Red Mage actually has a melee rotation.
I'm guilty.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
guilty.
I was like, I'm a cancer man. I was supposed to say, it's just like, Anyways, with the two types of controllers, each set has a different way to go about for a comfortable rotation. Luckily, we're both self-proclaimed professionals in both categories. With this being said, macros are not something you should rely on. While I do understand that people have like quirky sayings in regards to reses, along with a little sound effect, and who you're targeting, these do not end up registering sometimes, which can throw off the entirety of the fight. Where it's like you think you've casted it and it doesn't go off, then you're constantly spamming it and the noise is coming out, or the text itself is fairly questionable.
Hey, listen, okay? It is time to get up though, Master. Anyways.
Wait. With this being said, they did, Endwalker has resolved a little bit of this problem with slow casting, where it actually tells you which number you're casting from. So for instance, on the side of the bar, as you can see somebody using Raise or any sort of resurrection spell, after the name of the spell, there's a number alongside that spell that tells you which number they're targeting on your party list. Which, thank goodness they did this, because oh my gosh, I keep on accidentally double raising. With this being said, moving on to the controllers themselves, I personally use a controller where, as most of the PlayStation community and those have migrated from PlayStation community have done, and Ruby uses the good old mouse and keyboard.
It's better.
No, it's not!
Yes, it is.
Anyways. That is the wrong one. I meant to use... One moment, menu.
Listen, there's assets. Assets are hard.
Assets are hard. I was like, I have Ruby's assets. I don't have my own. Okay. With controller, you have it set up with technically 16 buttons on one set. 4 being on X, triangle, and circle, and 4 being on the directional buttons. If you have a if you have a game that you love the most that has the typical X button to mash or any sort of regular attack button, I recommend having that button be used for your mostly used or the first part of your rotation in a fight. Other than that, when it does come to clockwise, I feel like that you have to go through sequences. Like for instance, I know Melee has their 1-2-3s. I recommend having those on a clockwise or counterclockwise rotation on your hotbar, whether it be to better allow you to keep moving through the flow. So for instance, like moving through circle X triangle or something of the sort. With this being said, most damage dealers have also a 2-minute buff for damage. I also recommend having this on your first set, mainly due to using it within your first rotation. Though the only negative sides that I've noticed with controller itself is that with classes with a lot of button bloat, for instance, for me it's Astrologian, that it tends to get a lot, and you can't really fit everything within the set. So I keep it to one or two hotbars, mainly so I don't have to press and hold to change the set of what I have and finagle my way around. Because for me, that induces more panic. Though, hopefully with all of this, it will provide you more of an advantage rather than a hindrance. Now then, when it comes to keyboard and mouse, those are completely different.
After all, keyboard and mouse is where it's at. It is the play style of choice for me, at least.
Sure, Ruby.
But yeah, so with keyboard and mouse, your keybinds and hotbars are a lot more customizable. You're able to adjust the size. You're able to adjust its lengths, whether you do it 1x12, 2x6, 3x4, 4x3, 6x2, or 12x1. As well as you can do so many different combinations of buttons at your disposal. One of the common ones I usually do for DPS or for my healers when I'm using my main rotation, I will always use the numbers 1 through 6. Usually followed by that, I will have other buttons that might be easier to access, like certain buffs I will have from Control 1 through 4 or Alt 1 through 4. Usually you're able to adjust how you want your keys to be pressed based upon the size of your hand, as well as if you're using your mouse instead of only using your keyboard, you can customize your buttons on your mouse to be able to press more buttons at once. As I know for a lot of melees, they have a lot of multiple different rotations for pressing buttons. So you're able to use this to the best of your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who might play MOBAs, you can also just use the MOBA standards to your advantage, like QWERTY and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But with how many buttons there are in this game, it can be a little overwhelming. But that's why it's usually best to level your class from the very beginning to max, so that way you can see all the buttons that you have and learn as you go, per se.
Yep. I've also seen a lot of people just like click to target, which they're crazy. I'm just looking at them like, what? Why? How? What? Because with MOBAs, you have to constantly click to move. But
and I just saw something. Hold on, I have to answer this.
Sure.
Oh, never mind. Ignore me. I'm looking at the wrong thing.
Okay. No, that's okay. We're human. Speaking of being human, with that being said, while we're not top tier raiders in the Slayist, we just wish to share what we've learned once again to others in hopes that you find your own flow within the game, no matter what you seek to achieve. And with that, we are finished with our presentation and can move on to the Q&A, which this music is a little bit intense for that.
Yeah, I'm swapping it. Give me a minute.
I know. I appreciate you.
I know. So I know we kind of went over things very, very fast.
Yes, I am sorry.
It's okay. Listen, I understand. If there are things that you guys have questions about, whether it's in regards to controller, keyboard, mouse, different types of resources that you can look up for learning about your rotation, or if you want something in regards to like fight maps again, you're always more than welcome to ask. Or if you just have general questions about rating in general.
Yep, and then we can
Both
just...
of us have experience in our own fields and we'll be able to answer accordingly.
And Ruby is more of a queen of all trades when it does come to specific roles, where I am more of the range and support area. So any specific questions regarding melees or tanks, she'll be able to answer a little bit better than I can. Though we are all human.
That is true.
Mm-hmm.
I generally have tried to play. I usually try to play every class as much as often as possible. So I typically kind of have some understanding for some, more so than others. But I have done at least every tier on each role.
First question is towards you, Ruby.
I'm not allowed to disclose that information.
Uh-huh.
I'm not allowed to disclose that information.
Avoiding the question.
I'll tell you later. I promise. Maybe.
Smiles.
We'll see.
I do apologize. I once again overestimated the speed that we go through, mainly because I can't breathe. And I admit it.
From least favorite up, I can't do that either.
Avoiding the questions.
Listen, no, we're supposed to be meeting up tonight for discussion, and if any of them see me here and they'd see my least favorite order, okay, I can tell you this: my least favorite's my samurai.
Ew.
I'll tell you that much.
The tea.
Actually, Max asked a very good one.
Have you ever had a moment during high-end rating that made you realize you needed to shift something about the way you played? Actually, yes. With P4S Part 2, I had asked Ruby, because she had cleared it prior to me, regarding how her summoner dealt with the first bits of the fight itself. She said, "Oh, they use Ifrit second." And I was like, "Great, I had Ifrit on this button." So what I did was I switched the two so that way I wouldn't keep on using it on accident. Because once I use it, it's in my mind like, ah, crud, I used it. Now I don't know what I'm going to do next. And then we wait.
And on my end, I actually have a very good question, or I actually have a very good answer about this, because this was most recent for me when I did DSR. I actually had my keybind layout completely different before I started doing DSR. I never used like HTZ or alts and stuff like that. But recently I kind of learned that it's a lot harder for me to reach farther out buttons than I kind of thought about. And that certain buttons that I was using more common were not in ideal positions. Like, for example, one of the biggest things, especially about healing in DSR, is it's a very healing intensive fight. And typically I try to keep all my heal buttons together, but there were certain buttons that I would usually never press in a normal Savage fight that I've had to press in this fight, or like in DSR specifically. So I've had to actually change my layout accordingly, just so that I can keep everything together and have a more sustainable uptime for the group and more consistency.
Mm-hmm. And for a quick jokingly answering question, Liquid I only have one DSR static, and thus far it is my favorite, because it's my only static. If any of my static members see this, please don't kill me. But moving on, what's the best way to build / join a community? I can't really say much in regards to building a community, but joining into one would mainly be letting yourself out there, whether it be like the party finders of people looking for specific roles that they need for static, or subs for said events that they have, or discords that are mainly around trying to find people in likeness to what you're looking for, and mainly just being yourself. Because if you're trying to put on a face or mask to fit in, it all ends up coming back to you feeling like that it's not actually you, which can also coincide not only with your mental health, but with how you react to people in general.
After all, this is a game. We're all here to have fun, even while progressing.
Mhm.
So it's very important that you keep your mind first and foremost.
Mhm.
And as always, it's rare that you'll ever find people that you're going to be comfortable with the first time you start doing things.
Mhm.
It's always a matter of just trying your best to keep reaching yourself out there, looking at the multiple different types of resources, and just going from there.
And you don't have to be mad.
No.
I wanted to use the meme. Anyways.
And then I think there's another question for you that's
Yeah.
controller related. Yep. I do not play controller. I'm sorry, guys.
You're fine, Remi. For controllers, what are your thoughts on the expanded hold controls, pressing one button then the other, and the wide cross hotbar, double pressing a button for more hotbar space? That I actually didn't. I knew it was a thing because I've seen it on Drax videos when I've watched him through his compilations, but I never knew how to do it, to be honest. I've only been a masochist and only been using one set of hotbars. So I've been, needless to say, using a controller possibly the wrong way. But hey, I've at least gotten to clear most of the stuff that I've been able to do with only one set, 32 set of hotbars. What's another 32?
Right.
But I will look into that. Go ahead.
I see another good question here.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you use macros? Or do you have a list of helpful macros that you use? Any /hotbar commands, action commands, etc. Mm-hmm. Feels like they have a semi-taboo given their clipping issue. Anything to help break the stigma. So a lot of issues that I actually used, macros that I used to use personally, were things for like Asylum for White Mage or Earthly Star for Astro, but they fixed that recently with being able to just double click the button to place down those circles. Other general ones that I've noticed too are, a lot of people will use them for Astrologian's cards. Which can feel taboo at the beginning, but trying to target a certain person on your bar, especially with controller, I know is a lot harder than keyboard and mouse. Because with keyboard and mouse, while yes, it's F1 through F8, it is up
and down for controller.
Yeah, but it can be very taunting from, let's say you're trying to give the card to like the summoner, and the summoner's all the way at the bottom, and you're at like the halfway point. Typically macros would be okay in that situation, but you really have to be careful when using those macros specifically, only because if you're just finishing, every class has some sort of animation lock. So always trying to one of the biggest things is your ping will also affect this animation lock. So it's really learning, it's really taking the time to learn when your, animation lock is over per se, and then being able to use the macro reporting. Of course, you can just spam the button, or you can have the button do multiple things on the macro. But generally, yeah, it's very hard to find any macros that have most uses besides potentially provoking, shirking, throwing a card, or raising.
Yep. My main thing is like with my experience with macros, I've only had like raising macros, and I do admit I do have one for Limit Break 3, mainly because healers don't use it all that often, and I have it where it like spams the ability, so that way it doesn't actually not clip in regards to that, because I like having little quips. But I did notice a mention from Whisper regarding like being self-conscious about how they're playing. I did type this in chat, but I'm also going to say it here so that way it's recorded for prosperity, that all you can do is your best in regards to games. After all, as we mentioned before, it's only a game. Why have to be mad? And a really, really good friend of mine mentioned to me when I was self-conscious about a few things that the only person saying no is you. So you have to step up and tell them to tech off or something.
And before I forget to finish off,
sorry.
As regards to the stigma behind macros, as long as you find a way to optimize it, the people with you will be fine. it's really hard to kind of break the stigma entirely to the community with using macros. But generally, if you find a way that you can use the macro to the best of your ability that won't throw you off in any way, shape, or form, if you're comfortable doing it, go ahead and do it. There is nothing wrong with using macros at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And then I also just saw a question right after them that I'm going to answer.
Sure.
Should players with high ping geolocation give up on even trying hard content? No. Let me put it this way. My co-healer, my Sage, plays on 300 ping because they
Whoa.
live in Hong Kong.
Holy crap.
And they're playing on an NA data center, and we cleared DSR. It's never impossible.
That and
You will just, the biggest thing is just learning how to optimize with your ping.
Mhm.
That is really what it comes down to. It can be hard when you have higher ping because it's harder to weave your abilities per se, like using your off global cooldowns in between your global cooldowns.
Mm.
But believe it or not, people with higher ping can still do amazing things.
Yep. As well as when it does come to that type of stuff, it's also harder to greed certain things. So, for instance, if you're standing around casting and there's an AoE standing on top of you, you need to move a little bit sooner if you have higher ping. But moving on to the next question I saw, and I had a little bit of a chuckle at because I'm very excited to answer this. How do you adjust to the chaos that is higher end content? That's the funny thing. You don't. Anyways, real answer. Mainly analyzing the chaos at hand and trying to simplify it, because, for instance, with Dragon Song, some people have mentioned that Nidhogg is the hardest one of the bunch, whereas other people say it's a walk in the park. I've looked at a little bit of the guide for it, to how-tos, and like explaining what certain buffs and debuffs do during the time, and I've realized it's very simple. So I cannot wait to get back there.
Yeah, a lot of it is just seeing things happen, looking at those things, understanding what happens, and then as you see them again, slowly start to adjust to be a lot more comfortable with it. As someone who had struggled with the way that their group had done the eyes phase in Dragon Song for a while, it took me a bit to finally understand after I asked about 6,000 questions.
Wait, that's not the optimal. The way that I've seen you do is not the optimal way?
Yeah, I'm not a god gamer. Come on now.
What?
Let's see. There is another one I just saw that was really good. Oh, here we go. Do you feel like being called out for your mistakes post-pool or even into the next pool, Savage or Ultimate, strains your group as a whole? This is a really good question.
It strains me.
As somebody who constantly made mistakes when she first joined her group, since I was doing most of the fights on Sage, and I had to swap to White Mage because I did not feel comfortable trying to do Astro in Dragon Song, or even with the tier until after we had cleared the Savage tier. I definitely feel like it may not strain the group as a whole, because the group might get a little annoyed with certain times. Like if you're repeating a mistake on a mechanic, at that point it's best to ask. But generally calling out mistakes post-pool or even into the next pool, it's one thing if it's post-pool, but if it's going into the next pool, it can definitely be more straining, because for some of us, like I know I'm a very emotional person, so sometimes I take things a little too literally. It definitely affects how I feel personally while I'm doing the pool, and can chain me into doing multiple bad pulls at once. While I try to get over it, for some of us, it's not easier to get over a mistake than others. It is definitely something that is not easy to adjust to, but if somebody is repeatedly calling it out, if they're doing it in a more generalized, nicer tone, it's one thing, but the more but the longer they start doing it, I think it's more personally a problem that you might have to discuss with that person or possibly discuss with your raid leader. And this is something I forgot to mention, but I really wanted to actually point this out. While you are all raiding as a group, don't think of your raid as a job. You will not enjoy it. You will not enjoy it. As someone who used to do it that way, you will not. But using that job standard in motion, think of your raid lead as your supervisor or your boss. They are there to both keep everybody together and try to keep everything set in stone. So always remember that if you have a problem with your group, it is sometimes best to always talk to your raid lead first, and then typically a good raid lead will find a solution, or they will figure out the best course of action for you. As someone who did raid lead once, it can be very stressful for the raid lead in situations like this. But generally, a good raid leader will do their best to try to adjust. And if they just try to blatantly flat out ignore you, don't take this as, full advice. But personally, I would be looking for other groups at that point if they're not willing to help accommodate the situation.
Yes. Or for those that are more into fantasy stuff, think of your raid lead as your general.
That too. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're the co-lead as lieutenant. Or the other way around, depending on ranks. I didn't do squadrons.
Adding on to this too, yes, co-leads can be very helpful. Most groups will generally have a raid lead with a co-raid lead. And they will be able to discuss things if something is brought up to either one of them. And they'll be able to help resolve, because I definitely have had some issues in the past with my group that I have brought up to both my co-lead and my raid lead, and they were able to find out best solutions on fixing that.
Yeah. But like, what if you aren't with a static and don't have one? I'm not sure if this is can cover right, but say like the pool is like you're really scuffed, and there's like, what's a good way to keep the mood light and not let frustration get to people? Good question, because I think this is more geared towards the party finder aspect of things. I, for one, with party finder, do try to at least type in any and all like positivity vibes, or if there's something that happens through somebody else's banter, I do tend to throw out puns here and there to try to lighten the mood, to ensure this is like, instead of people focusing on the fact that they wiped and that the party finder is stupid and all this negative stuff, they can be like, haha, funny fun.
Yeah, one of the general things in Party Finder, as someone who did a tier on Party Finder, which was probably my most stressful experience, people will get very frustrated easily, and it's mainly because everybody in a Party Finder will have a very large variance in level of adaptability, of learning, etc., etc. It's best to always just try to add some lighthearted comments, and as Remi said, it's always just best to try to
pun it out.
Yeah.
In addition to that, party finder is also how I found most of my memorable friends, or from another instance, my FC. Because some party finders have you join a Discord in order to have everything done. So that way, if you're talking shit, you're able to not do it through a computer. You can do it to their face.
Oh, jeez, Remi, what would I do with you? What would I do with you?
What do you mean?
And an actual good point here, one of the messages is, I think when people start arguing between each other, someone stepping in and saying, no big deal, let's just pull again, is definitely a very good go-to statement. Very good go-to statement. And if somebody starts causing problems from that, then if you're the lead, get rid of them. Because at that point, they're just trying to find and start a fight. And typically, you don't want people around that are trying to start a fight.
Yep.
And if not, if you're starting to feel uncomfortable, always leave and find another group.
Yep. I, for one, whenever things happen or people like say outright that it's their bad, I'm just like, no worries, we're human. Let's go again. Because that's all we are, human. Unless you are secretly hiding something, then I would like to know, and I'm pretty sure Area 51 will also like to know.
Also, I know this is a joke question, but pineapple or pizza, no or wrong?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, no. Absolutely not. You don't put sweet things on savory. Yes, Giga, I'm calling it out. No pineapples on pizza. Fight me.
Also, I see, let's see, here we go. I see a statement here, and I'm just going to kind of add a little bit to it. I started raid leading a couple months ago. My static really likes my style, but I have some trouble calling out people on mistakes since I don't mean to be rude. This can be a very stressful situation, but you can always DM the person or talk to the person away from being in voice chat with the group, as usually when it's more one-on-one, people are able to accept it more than generally when you're calling somebody out in the group. Like, if you have to take 2 to 3 minutes to make that message in DMs or something, always take that time to do it. Because at the end of the day, some people may not even realize the types of mistakes that they're having until somebody, until somebody tries to, like, look and state that. So always remember that it's always good to be nice, it's always good to be lenient, but if you need to make that stand because of people making mistakes, you can always just message them, whether it's through a direct message or through a whisper after raid.
And going down the line of the chat, I noticed that somebody was mentioning that they've done DSR and been doing a lot of tech issues, which is add up to the waste of time. That they did 11 days in a row, 5 hours each. Oh my gosh, please rest. 30% of this time being lost on 30% of this time being lost. I would opt to ask for a bit of a break because, much like work days as a normal job, y'all deserve a break. And if you're stacking job on top of trying to clear something as big as an ultimate, then mental stress and health, lack of self-care in regards to health can impact on the sidelines of messing up on easy technical things. Like, for instance, near the end of the night for my DSR raids, I tend to zone out and accidentally get cleaved by Thornton's first move, like an idiot, because it is a Protean that locks to your position and then fires out from that position. The thing is, a lot of people are stacking together. I zone out, everybody moves, I don't, I die. And we're getting to the point where we can get through it if the things are done properly. So, yeah.
Yes. If things are starting to feel stressful and time is being wasted, try to always give yourself that break and ask, like, hey, is it okay if we take a break just so people can get things sorted out or things like that? DSR is one of the hardest fights in the game. As someone who has done everything on content, DSR is the hardest fight in game right now and is the closest one to 20 minutes. That's a lot of time, especially if you're getting to those 18, 19-minute marks and you're still learning those parts of the phase. Things will get very, very stressful towards the end of the fight.
And
go ahead.
I was like, and I've heard that 20 minutes does not include the vault phase.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it or does it not?
It does.
Oh, it does.
It
okay.
Does. Yeah.
Just want to make sure, because I've heard different variants. Because if that's the case, then it's technically 22 minutes.
Oh yeah, it's 22 adding the vault phase. Yeah.
So I was right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let me see. Holy crap! So many questions. We're starting to run low in time too.
Yep.
Okay, here's a good one because I have someone who actually just recently went through this. I hope I'm not skipping. How do you get past the feeding feeling of Party Finder over and over and over and making no progress? I had somebody who was stuck for 3.5, maybe 4 weeks on P4 or P3S, and they were doing it daily. Unfortunately, the biggest thing is to just look at the end of the day and be like, you will do this and you will find a way to get through it. Typically, if you're able to make friends that are doing the same progress as you and you're able to get there, see if you're able to gather some of those friends together to eventually get that clear. But the best way is just to tell yourself that you can keep moving forward and you just have to push to the best of your ability. Because at the end of the day, as long as you're doing your best, you're going to keep your best in your mindset. Let's see here.
Yep, and for the record, you did not skip.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Because there's a bunch of pineapple.
Yeah, pineapple pizza questions.
Oh, here we go. Do you both use standard or legacy movement when did you decide legacy was just better? And when did you decide legacy was just better for reading?
To be honest,
so believe it or not, I have a PS4 player who plays on what am I using? Legacy. I have a PS4 player who plays on standard, just because it is easier for them to optimize their movement. And there are plenty of people who do play on standard because some people feel it's a lot easier to optimize how they move because they're not used to moving backwards. They're only used to moving forwards or strafing. Legacy is very good for a lot of people who may not be able to optimize that on top of keeping things up. But it really comes down to your preferred style of play, realistically. If you feel that the standard camera helps you see things better, or the legacy camera helps you feel things better, it's the best way to just do it.
To be honest, I don't know that there are two different types of movements, so I've been using standard probably for the entire time.
You're probably using legacy.
I have no idea.
All right,
I'll look at my settings a little bit. Go ahead.
We can take 2 more questions, I think, because we're about to run out of time.
Yeah.
How do you rein in overly chatty people that are distracting the group? Message them, whether they're doing it in game or if you're in voice chat with them, message them privately, or just be like, all right, let's clear comms and let's get back to it. If they continue to start doing this, then it is something that you might have to just call out on voice against them. Unfortunately, I've had people who were very overly chattive when it comes to groups. And yes, while we're there to have fun, we're also there to make progress. If that chatting is causing distractions in prog, it is best to be something that is stated now than stated later. Yep.
And then flowing through really quick, because I think we can probably go through like more than 2, depending on like how we go through it. But hello, I'm a noob who is an AR, but super intrigued about rating progress as 14 is my first MMO. Oh, nice. Welcome. What's some general advice you'd have for preparing for and doing raids? So with that being said, to prepare for raids, mainly picking a class that you're most comfortable with. Like for instance, we're able to go through all of the dungeons that we've done, or going from min to lowest to highest level, to see how you feel regards everything. But if you want to try out a class before committing to it, I recommend looking at videos of that said class or role to look into how everything is done. To which I would segue into Joe Cat's how to craft guide to Final Fantasy, because he does a very good job simplifying things when it comes to the classes themselves. And yeah, other than that, it's just putting yourself out there and to see what you like.
Yep, it's a lot of just looking, and looking. Realistically, it's a lot of studying, getting into it. And I think we have one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
How do you balance work and raid schedule? This is very hard because everybody has a different mindset in regards to this. The best way that you can do it is you have to view your raid as your relaxation time. If work starts becoming too much, then maybe it's best to step back and let your work mishaps go through first before going back into raiding again. It's really hard because for me personally, I work, come home, eat, shower, raid, sleep. And that is how it is for me Monday through Thursday. And it can be very stressful, but it's the best of just looking at the group as the best, just spending time with friends is the best way I can put it. That is honestly the best way to be able to ease that.
Yep. And with that, we are out of time for Rating 102, How to Harness Your Anxiety. hopefully we have helped you into harnessing that insanity to let out all the chaos that you can through Party Finder or what for. Once again, we thank you so much, everybody, for listening in. And Ruby, do you have anything else to say?
If any of you have unanswered questions that really need to, if you can find me, I will be around throughout the day, or you can message me at Ruby Mischel or Ruby Mischel from Goblin. I will be on Bryn, obviously, for the rest of the day. Or you can contact me through Twitch or through Discord at Bluestar number 6985.
Yep. And same here. I'll be wandering around LunarCon as well for main festivities, as well as the Glamour contest that's happening soon. But if you have any questions, feel free to DM me at Remi Nightwind in parentheses, or Aqua Sorceress in parentheses Remi Nightwind on LunarCon's Discord. And with that, thank you all so much again, and have a great rest of your LunarCon. Take care.
Take care.